Little perspective, let's bring in former FEMA Director James Lee Witt. Nice to see you, sir. Appreciate you being with us. It's now been about 5 hours, 6 hours since sunup there in Texas, and as you can tell, we're starting to get video in from various spots. Take us through the tick-tock. You've got all of these pre-staged resources that we've been hearing about north and west of landfall. Take us through sort of these hours. What are first responders doing, and what equipment and resources are coming in behind them?
Well, the first thing is as soon as they can get in to do search and rescue, which it looks like they've already started, and then the next phase would be to start getting the debris cleaned up out of the right-of-ways so that they can get the other vehicles and other people in to do the damage assessments as quick as possible, starting at the local level and the state and FEMA teams coming in and assessing the damage and what the needs are.
We keep hearing from Janice Dean and from others and our reporters on the ground that after this storm, unusually so for a hurricane, the storm is sticking around and continuing to dump more and more water, up to 30, sometimes perhaps forecasted up to 50 inches. How much does that complicate the typical hurricane response that you just talked about?
It really complicates it. If you remember Hurricane Floyd that came into North Carolina, it was a flood hurricane. I mean, it literally flooded almost that entire state. It just dumped inch after inch of rain. We saw pigs on top of barns. You know, it was so deep. And this is a challenge they're going to have here. And the challenge here is you'll have a lot of infrastructure damage that you cannot see right now, and it's going to take weeks, months, and years for the full recovery of this. And it's really important that the president signed the declaration. It's even more important that he appointed Brock Long, the new administrator of FEMA, because he's a very experienced state director of emergency management. And I know for 8 years I was at FEMA, FEMA employees are just very good at what they do, and they'll be there to support the state of Texas and local governments. And you know, it's important that they get this right, because this is, you know, people's lives and people's livelihood that you're dealing with, and it's important that they get this done as fast as can.
Well, live pictures right now from Rockport, Texas, and that is where the eye wall came ashore. They were talking about winds of about 150 miles an hour, and you can see what that did to an apartment complex. Steve Harrigan was telling behind us. On the note of communications, you know, so often now the world relies on cell phones, and cell phone towers are not able to withstand sometimes these kinds of winds and this type of storm. The generators go out. You've got the flooding that comes in as well. Last night, the lieutenant governor of Texas told us this is a Texas-sized storm. We're preparing a Texas-sized response. Is there enough resources to flood the zone, or by the time you've got this flooding, therefore you can't bring in heavy equipment, you probably can't get across some of the roads here, especially out into these areas right next to the water on the shore, and you don't have communications? What specific resources does the federal government bring to that even the state of Texas can't?
Well, they can use the heavy lift helicopters to get resources in there if need be. They also can do cell towers on wheels to get in there as well, to put up cell towers so that they can have communications in those local communities that the cell towers are gone. So there's a lot of availability in technology that they can use to get that back up pretty fast. And it's important that they can communicate with the local officials, particularly in the State Operations Center.
Yeah, well, last night, as this storm was coming ashore, we talked to some folks in the Texas Emergency Operations Center. They couldn't get a hold of the police in Rockport. They couldn't get a hold of the police in Port Aransas and Aransas Pass. There was a lot of communication that had gone down. We're still looking at various pictures, and what's always striking to me is you see this damage. Then comes the flooding, and you also have the issues of all the utilities that are down. You've got power lines now in these floodwaters. You've got gas lines that oftentimes spark off huge fires, and there's sort of so few first responders that are able to come in, and so much for them to do. What are the priorities for these first responders as they are now making their way onto these hardest hit outer islands?
Well, the first priority is to be able to get in there to see if there's any people that's in there that is hurt or injured or got killed. That's the first priority. And then the second priority is to start trying to get in to get power lines out of the streets and the roads and the debris so that they can bring other equipment in to help in the recovery process. You know, when Katrina, when it hit, and Governor Blanco called me down to help in that response, my company, then there was no communications. 800 megahertz got knocked out. Everything got knocked out. And through a partnership with, at that time, Nextel, they sent down 4,000 handsets and cell on wheels so that we could set up communications, and that's what they're going to have to do.
Well, thankfully, if there is a silver lining here, it looks like this storm sort of came ashore right between Corpus Christi and Galveston, a little bit less populated area, which sometimes just makes it easier in terms of less people, less infrastructure to have to repair. Mr. Witt, we really appreciate your time and obviously your service through some difficult times in America. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you very much.